Hey guys, this is Melissa with Love Covered Life, and today I'm going to do another Q&A video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and don't forget to talk to me in the comments. I love hearing from you. I love getting your questions and hearing your thoughts and stories. I have 5 questions here again today, but I've lumped a couple of them together just because they're sort of in the same category. So question number 1. Is it possible to save someone who is unwilling to be saved? You could save a body from death or even save a soul from literally going to hell, but if the mind remains unchanged, is that person saved? Won't it be violence to save an unwilling soul? What sort of heaven would it be with people saved apart from their free will? And then the second question that's sort of along the same lines. You said suffering is not God's will. The way I see it is that if God allows something to happen, then it must mean that it's His will to let it happen. Anything at all, good or bad. Can you see where I'm coming from? Okay, so both of these questions are basically about the sovereignty of God versus the free will of man. At least that's how I'm reading them. This is one of the most difficult topics to try to explain, and there are many different ways of explaining this. I am just going to give my personal understanding on this topic. Hopefully, it will be helpful and not further complicate things. So, the way I see it is that God is one, God is infinite, God is all that is. We are His creation, but as His creation, we have our source in Him. Everything that was created by God had its source in Him. We are an expression of Him. Therefore, we are an expression of His nature. Therefore, the only thing that exists is the nature of God. Now, the Bible tells us several things that God is. God is love. God is one. God is light. God is a consuming fire, or basically a purifying force. So these are all different ways of describing the same thing. Love, which is the nature of God, is a state of perfection and wholeness and harmony and completeness, oneness. One way of describing love is that it is the force in the universe that is pulling everything back into a state of oneness and harmony and perfection. And so by nature, God is purifying. He is perfecting everything. He is pulling everything back into a state of oneness and perfection and harmony. And that state is truly all that exists, because God and expressions of God is all that exists. So love is all that exists. You look around you in the world, everything you see was created by God. It originated from God. It is an expression of God. It is love. Love is all there is. The purpose of our lives here on earth are to learn about the nature of God, which is love, oneness, perfection, harmony, light. We are here to learn about God experientially. In order to do that, there has to be the illusion that something other than God exists. And we come here to experience the opposite of God in order to awaken to the truth of who God is, in order to come to know the nature of God, which is also our own nature. So we find the nature of God within ourselves because we are expressions of God and God's Spirit is within us. Even if you are of the denominations of Christianity that believe the Holy Spirit was not given until the New Testament, even in the Old Testament, it talks about how God was not in the thunder or the lightning. He was in the still small voice. So God has always been within our hearts. We've just had different ways of explaining that over time. Our lives here, to our eternal spirits, which is what we are, is like a dream. So you go to sleep and you dream at night, and when you're in the dream, it's very real, but when you wake up, you can clearly see that it was an illusion. So we come here to earth and we live this life, and it's very real while we are in it. But to our spiritual selves, it is an illusion. The bad things that happen to us here are part of a dream. So when it comes to the sovereignty of God versus the free will of human beings, they can both be true at the same time. Because all that exists is God and the nature of God and the expressions of God. In the end, even the things that appear bad to us here are still expressions of God, because in the absence of God, we see our need for Him all the more clearly. It's the contrast. So, for example, when you're really, really hungry, food tastes so much better than it does if you're just a little bit hungry. Or if you're completely exhausted, falling into your bed at night is heavenly. You don't appreciate your bed if you're not tired. You don't appreciate the taste of food if you're not hungry. So, in the same way, you don't appreciate love, the nature of God, if you haven't experienced the lack of that. So we come here to be put into situations where people will hurt us, take advantage of us, and we will have a reason to have to choose to forgive. And when we find that forgiveness within ourselves, we find the nature of God, and we awaken to the reality of who God is and who we are as an expression of Him. Or if we choose not to forgive, then we experience the opposite of God, and the goal of that is to ultimately wake us up to the fact that that's not our true nature. That's not who God is. It's a process for all of us of choosing God or choosing the opposite of God, and slowly we are all progressing back towards oneness with God. The wrong choices that we make, we are still choosing something which will ultimately lead us back to God. All choices ultimately lead to God, because the nature of God is all that actually exists. So I've talked about this story before, but just to put a visual to it, when I had my near-death-like experience when I was 19, and my consciousness expanded out of my head, and I had an experience of connection with bliss and unbelievable love and ultimate knowledge that many, many millions of other people have had. One of the things that I was shown is I was shown a visual of what the plan of God looks like. And the visual that I saw was the shape of a hurricane, although it was much more complicated and intricate than that. It was like a giant Mandela pattern, but it was swirling around on the edges. There was this powerful current that was pulling everything within back into the center. And within the outer edges in the center was the life path of every created conscious being. And on their life paths, they had free will to make their own choices. They could choose good or they could choose bad. But even the bad choices were within this pattern. And this pattern was love. It was harmony. It was perfection. Even when they made the bad choices or the wrong choices, they themselves were part of this pattern, which was love. They themselves were love. They themselves were perfection. They themselves were harmony and wholeness and oneness. In the illusion of choosing the opposite of God, they were still choosing God, because all choices lead back to God. So everybody has their own free will, but in a sense, free will is sort of an illusion, because we can't choose anything other than God. Even when we think we're choosing the opposite of God, ultimately we will still choose God, because in the end, everything will be reconciled to God. Is it possible to save someone who's unwilling? No. The person has to choose to be saved, but ultimately all people will choose. There is no other way to go except back to God. I mean, love is an irresistible force. That's one of the things that the Calvinists have right. Irresistible grace. Love is irresistible. It melts the heart. No matter how long it takes, it will win everybody back. Wouldn't it be violence to save unwilling souls? Yes, it would. But anybody who is unwilling to be saved is still trapped in their own illusions, and eventually they will be freed from that. If God allows something to happen, then it must mean it's His will to let it happen. Anything at all, good or bad, yes, and that can be true. And at the same time, we can say that God is not the author of suffering, because suffering is our choice. He allows it because he knows that ultimately it will lead back to him in the end. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I know it's a very complicated and confusing topic to talk about. Please let me know if you have further questions. My third and fourth questions are again on the same subject. So question number 3, I've heard you speak of near-death experiences. Many such persons have said they visited a place of unimaginable sorrow, gloom, and torment. What are your thoughts on this aspect of near-death experiences? And question 4, I believe that it's in this video that you said you do believe in hell, but that it's temporary punishment. Well, you're right about the punishment part, but what is hell in the afterlife like? Will it be literal fire with worms crawling in and out of you, like traditional Christianity teaches? As I have studied the Bible, biblical prophecy in the Old Testament, and Jesus' predictions of end times in the New Testament, I have been less and less convinced that the Bible actually talks about hell in the afterlife. This is something that I am still researching, so my opinion on this could change. There are people who have experienced hell in the afterlife in near-death experiences. Those who have experienced an actual fiery place of torment and with worms crawling in and out of them and been told that hell is eternal and there's no way out are such a small percentage. And you're going to have things like that, statistically speaking, regardless of the subject you're talking about. You're going to have outliers like that. And then you have to question, okay, are these people making this up? Did this actually happen? Were they given this experience for a specific purpose? Just because they are so incredibly rare. Most of the near-death experience stories that I have read, where people have a hellish experience, it is more along the lines of Howard Storm's. And I talk about Howard Storm all the time. He went to a very negative, dark, and gloomy place. And there were other human beings there with him, not demonic creatures, debased human beings who had really progressed downward to like an animalistic nature. And some of the things that happened to him there, yes, they were so horrible that he won't talk about them. And he says that it was like the sewage of the universe where he was. It was completely hopeless. He felt like he was there for an eternity. He felt like he was trapped forever. But here's the difference between hell and near-death experiences and the traditional hell taught in Christianity. In near-death experiences, almost across the board, when somebody finds themselves in this dark and gloomy and lonely place that they refer to as hell, as soon as they open their heart to the light, as soon as they have the thought to call out to God, the light appears to them. Jesus comes to them. And what they find is that they are only in this place of hell because of their own level of consciousness, because of where they are at mentally and emotionally. This is what they are creating. This is what they believe in. In Howard Storm's case, he was an atheist, but not just in the sense that he questioned the existence of God or didn't intellectually believe in God, but he had a very hard heart. He hated God. He hated religion. He was very belligerent towards religion, and he describes himself as a very angry person. And so when he passed into the next life, he found himself in a place of that vibrational frequency, a place that he himself was drawn to because that's the level that he was at. Now, as he was laying in that place, he remembered singing "Jesus Loves Me" as a child, and he called out to Jesus. And as soon as he did that, Jesus appeared to him and rescued him from hell. And Howard was told that he was not ready to go to heaven, that he still had much growth to do before he would be able to stand being in the presence of God. And I think that's the case with most of us. Howard ultimately was sent back to Earth to continue his growth here, and obviously that's what happens with near-death experiences. That's the only way that we end up hearing their story. But all of that to say that yes, I do believe in I don't want to use the word hell. I don't like the word hell because it's not used in the Bible, but there are different places in the spiritual realm that people can go. And if somebody is so closed and so hardened to God, so blind to God of their own choice, and I'm not just talking about somebody who believes differently than you or has doubts or questions about God, but somebody who is hard to God, somebody who's in a really negative spiritual and mental state when they die, can find themselves in a place that resonates with where they are at. But it's not because God sent them there. It's not because God is tormenting them. It's for the same reason that we find ourselves in these states on earth. We have hell around us everywhere on earth, and it's because we've created it. And God allows it because we need to experience what we've created to see that it's not our true nature. It's like I said before, we are here to learn about the nature of God, which is love. So when we are in a spiritual and emotional state where we are creating the opposite of that, we have to experience it to wake us up to the fact that that's not who we are. And Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. It's a state of being. So the kingdom of hell could also be within us, a state of being, something that we create. And if we can create it here, why not in the next life also? Our learning doesn't stop when we go into the next life. We're still on our journey towards God. I do believe in the existence of Gehenna, because that's what Jesus called it, in the afterlife. Places where we may bring suffering upon ourselves as a result of our own state of heart and our own choices. But the goal is to push us to the light. And as soon as we open our hearts to the light, Jesus made it clear. He is going after every lost sheep. God, the Father, is running after the prodigal son. He is not going to turn his back on anybody who is genuinely seeking him. My final question for this video is, Melissa, can you please give a clear example of how sharing what you have, even though you didn't have enough of it, caused you to have abundance of what you lacked at that time? So I talk from time to time about how we're creating with our state of being, and one of the things that I have said a couple of different times is that the best way to create abundance in your life is to be the provision for somebody else. Some people are turned off by this sort of thing, but it is actually what Jesus taught. Luke 6:38, give and you will receive. Your gift will return to you in full, pressed down, shaken together to make room for more, running over and poured into your lap. The amount you give will determine the amount that you get back. Jesus also addressed this issue in the story where he criticized the religious leaders for giving large sums of money and then praised the widow for giving her 2 last coins. The point was that it is about your heart. It is about the state of being that you are creating. Those Pharisees were giving large sums of money to be seen. And I think this is a lot of people twist this verse and actually use it for the same purposes today. I've been in charismatic word of faith churches if I'm being completely honest, I think they're trying to use these principles to manipulate their people into giving them money and saying, give your tithe to the church and then God will get you a new job or something like that. But what Jesus actually said is that it's about the heart. It's about the trust, the faith, the love, the state of being. I'm going to try to explain this. So, personal examples. When I was in college, I worked all summer to pay my tuition, while somebody that I knew needed to see a doctor and did not have the money, so they just weren't going to go. And it was going to cost them $1,000. So I took $1,000 out of my account for them to see the doctor, knowing that I would not have enough. And then what happened is right before I went to pay my bill, money appeared in my account. And I had exactly what I needed to pay my tuition. And I still have no idea where the money came from. And I just told myself, you know what? If I'm supposed to continue down this path, God will provide the money. And I did not worry about it. and then the money was there. Other examples I could give is that my husband and I struggled financially for years. We were in government housing. My husband lost his job 2 times, first during my first pregnancy and then again during my 3rd pregnancy. We lost our apartment twice. There were times when we did not have enough money to feed our kids. We couldn't get insurance during my 1st or 3rd pregnancies. And just miracle after miracle after miracle. I could tell you, it got to the point where I just didn't worry about stuff. We didn't have enough food. I just said, okay, I can't wait to see what God's going to do this time, because things would just keep happening. And I just learned to have an attitude of, I'm going to share what I have. I'm going to share what I have. Because when you're in a place like that where you just have nothing, then you can relate to other people who have nothing. And so my heart was, there's people on the street who are worse off than me. So if I have anything that I can give them to help them, I'm going to do that. And the miracles just started pouring in when I would live like that. So say somebody would be over at our house during dinner time, and I knew full well we didn't have enough food to get through the week, but I would offer for them to stay and have dinner with us. And then somebody would drive by with a box of food for some random reason. Somebody would drop off vegetables. Someone would drop off fruit. We owed tens of thousands of dollars in medical bills, and the hospital just forgave them. We didn't have to pay anything. Sort of a follow-up to this question was, does that happen to everyone? I suppose you had to have faith first in order for all of that to have happened. And this is a really sensitive subject. I actually don't like to talk about this because I realize that I live in a first world country, and there's people in the world who are starving, who don't have access to clean drinking water, people who are dying of diseases, and to tell them just have faith is really disconnected from the reality of the world. I can't deny that Jesus taught faith. He told everybody he healed that their faith had healed them. He rebuked his disciples for not having enough faith to calm the storm themselves. He said that if we had faith, we could move mountains. But I do think that the church has really misunderstood what faith is. Faith is, again, it's a state of being. Jesus, you have to take his whole message into consideration. And he talked about becoming like a little child in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, that state of being like a little child is faith. It is the state of awareness of God within your heart. And when you know that you have everything you need within you, then you don't worry. You don't look for it outside of you. And that's what faith is. It's knowing that you already have everything that you need. Knowing that God is one, God is infinite. That means lack cannot exist in the world. So just because it looks like you don't have enough, you already have enough. You just have to watch for how it will come into your life. What I do believe, when we're talking about some of the more challenging problems in the world, collectively, when we get to a place where we are living in awareness of our true nature, of God within our hearts, when we are living in oneness with God, expressed as love for the world, when we get enough of us in the world who are doing that, then the problems in the world will start to be eliminated. They will start to be solved. Right now, we are living mostly out of our flesh nature, fixing the problems in the world through politics and military and the use of violence and force, and that's never going to fix anything. It has to come from within. When we get the critical balance of people in the world who are living from that state of faith within, who are living from a place of knowing that we already have everything within us that we need to fix the problems in the world, then we'll be able to start solving them. All the problems in the world are created out of the illusion of us being separated from our source. But we already have everything we need. We're connected to our source. We have it all, and this is where the answers will come from. All right, so hopefully, again, that makes sense and is not further complicating the issues. These things are really tricky to try to explain. So let me know if I need to clarify anything. Be loved, be happy, be at peace, and thank you for watching.